Hello and welcome to Experience, the new weekly podcast where we get to psychoanalyze the news. We take what's going on in the world and use it as a reason for us to dissect human behaviour. With me on this psychological pilgrimage each week is the one and only Professor Peter Kinderman. Hello.
Hi there.
How's your week been?
Okay so far. We've got rid of scaffolding, so that's good.
Well, do you know, it's always a bonus if you don't have to see those pipes around your house. We had a very interesting week. We are waiting to hear about going to hospital for an operation on my middle child who's broken their leg quite spectacularly, really, for someone who barely leaves the house. But there we go. Right. First off, this week, I'd like you to introduce to us the concept of the week.
Okay, so it's a bit technical, but the concept of the week is variable ratio reinforcement. And it's what lies behind...
Sorry. Variable ratio reinforcement.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's what lies behind a lot of addiction, basically. At least the addiction planned by corporate entities. So we've got a fox that comes to visit us, and it may or may not be a good thing to feed urban foxes, but we feed urban foxes. And if you want your fox to come reliably, the best thing you can do is to feed them like about somewhere between 1 time in 3 and 2 times in 3. Not every time and not never. If you feed them never, they don't bother coming. If you feed them every time, then something interesting happens, which is the fox learns that they get food every time. When you don't get food, the fox gives up and goes away. What you want to do is keep the fox linked, keep the fox eager, keep the fox addicted. Ooh. So what you do is you don't have it on a schedule. So it's not 2 days food, 1 day off, because the fox will learn that and it won't be hooked. What you do is you have a variable ratio reinforcement where somewhere around 1/3 of the time, more or less random, you get a reinforcement. If you go to amusement arcades and you put your 10p or your pound in, then you'll get a clunking and a return on your investment about 1 time in 3. And it's hugely addictive. If you get reward every time, it's not addictive, because when it doesn't happen, you then give up. If you get a reward every time and then it stops, you stop. If you don't get a reward at all, so variable reinforcement. And this lies behind, for instance, things like amusing videos on TikTok. Okay. About 1 time you scroll, you see something amusing. Then you scroll and you scroll and you scroll and you scroll and you see something amusing. And then you see something amusing and then you scroll. So a variable ratio of reinforcement, about 1 in 3, keeps you hooked. And of course, people behind these things know that.
This is basically the psychological premise behind treat them mean to keep them keen.
Treat them a little bit mean, a little bit randomly, keep them on their toes, and they'll keep coming back for more.
How is it that every teenage boy knows to behave like this, whereas girls are sort of like, oh no, we like you? I mean, I know I'm generalising, but on the whole, it does tend to be that way. I think you're disagreeing. Maybe this really does show the difference between people who are successful or not successful. Maybe I was just far too eager. And maybe you were the ultimate treat them mean, keep them keen kind of guy.
It may or may not apply to the sexual politics of adolescence. It probably does. It certainly applies to things like fruit machines, slot machines, gambling. It applies to the way that they program the machines in Las Vegas. It applies to Betfred and Coral on the high street. It applies to, and I think it very much applies to, social media. So what you do is you set up the system to, it's not treat them mean and keep them keen. It's you set up the system to maximize the likelihood that they'll come back for more. Because if you're the chief executive of TikTok, you need people to come back for more. So you need the system. The same probably applies to whoever it is that writes the little tags on the most read versions of stories for the BBC News website, which is you've got to get people to scroll through a bit, find a bit of reward, and then come back for some more on a variable ratio reinforcement schedule.
It's the poo sandwich. This is what people do in companies, isn't it? Is that they squeeze in a really nasty bit of feedback where you absolutely need to improve your going on at the company with 2 lovely, nice nuggets either side.
Yeah.
The poo sandwich.
Yeah. And if you do it right, then it's all curves and mathematics, really. So if you do it right, you reward people at the right ratio. but not fixed, but where on average, the ratio of reward is just about right to keep people coming back for more. And then, you'll maximize your advert revenue and all of that sort of.
Well, we'll be discussing that a little bit in further detail, I think, because we're going to be talking later on about the Meta trial that is going to be going on for the next 5 or 6 weeks over in America, where 29 states have taken Meta to court. Right. We're also going to be talking about 100 Years of the Weekend, my favorite time of the week, and what that means for us. But we're going to start straight off by the naming of storms. Now, can you please explain to me why the naming of storms is just so important and why it works for us from a psychological perspective?
Okay, so from a psychological perspective, what you've got to do if you're running a Met office or if you're in charge of highways in Gloucestershire or whatever, is you've got to get people to act on information. And people on the whole are stupid, and therefore acting in their best interests, you need to put a bit of effort in order to get them to do it. So you tell people that there's a storm.
People on the whole are
Well, I
mean, just
mean,
because we don't have your IQ does not make us stupid.
Hey, I'm not saying that other people are stupid compared to me. I'm saying that human beings are stupid compared to ChatGPT. That's what I'm saying.
Oh yeah.
So you say to people, it's probably worth checking that your Velux windows are shut, and they go, oh, nanny state and blah 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 blah. So what they do is they say, we need to warn people that, they need to make sure that things are towed down. And if they've got gutters that are full, then empty the gutters and check on the neighbours and whatever it is that you need to do in terms of Met Office warnings. You really don't want people to get caught out because at the very least it's expensive sending out fire brigade to go and get people from having their houses flooded, and the worst people die. So it's worth getting people to take action. How do you get people to take action? You need to make it available. So you use all the heuristics. So you make things accessible, available, memorable. And if you name a storm, it just it's a little nudge in the slight direction of you're slightly more likely to notice that there's a story. Right. Maybe you won't even take it seriously. Maybe that's not the point. The point is you'll remember it and then you'll act on the information. So have you heard the storm warning? What storm warning is that? Well, it's a storm about one of the regular summer storms. No, it's Storm Ida, and then you take action. So it's just to get things at the front of people's minds. I suppose it's all about connectivity. You make things accessible, make things understandable, make things human, make things relatable, and then people are more aware.
And the Met Office clearly want to get customer engagement, in these storms, because last Friday was the closing date for a competition they were running where you could name the storm. They did it in conjunction with Aardman Studios, so it was a nice bit of PR puff. You could name the storm either Shaun the Sheep or his cousin Timmy. Which, they don't sound that threatening, do they, for the first thing? So I'm not sure how much notice I'd take. But equally, it's really unlikely that we'll ever have a storm because usually they don't get that far along on the alphabet. Wow. They start at A. I think in 2024, they got as far as L. But really, Shaun, Timmy, It's not going to work. What would you call a storm?
Oh, I'd call the storm Vlad the Impaler or something. Just make No, I wouldn't. I'd call the I quite like the idea. I quite like... It's not exactly regular because it's kind of new. I like the idea of running through the alphabet and naming. I quite like the idea of obscure names like Gwendolyn or something, just slightly. It'll annoy everybody called Gwendolyn, but just.
Are we going back to Araminta now?
Araminta, yeah. I think that just go back to the point of it is, brand awareness, maybe kind of marketing. I think, like I say, it would be. The reason why the Met Office exists is a bit like other health and safety, which is ultimately it's worth the government investing in that agency in order to save quite a lot of money. And if you can avoid unnecessary insurance claims and calls for the council to come and clear blocked gutters, blocked drains, if you could avoid Manchester Airport being shut down for an extra 2 hours by people taking some precautions about storms. I'm sorry, I don't want to sound particularly boring, but it's a good thing to do. So you have a naming competition, and it reminds people that actually some people who are reasonably good at maths are giving them some information that's useful for their well-being and financial probity.
And this does have a really big grounding in psychology as well, doesn't it? Because personification actually does work. Yeah. And we have a great history in naming things, don't we? And
Boaty
making sure.
McBoatface. Boaty McBoatface is one.
Well, in 2025, one of the public actually suggested Stormy McStormface. That's one of the storms, which I liked, although they were missing a trick because they could have done Stormy Daniels. My favourite from 2025 was Dame Judi Drench. That was pretty good. There was a David Blowie.
Very good. Around Manchester, when it falls to winter, they send around the gritter lorries, and of course all the gritter lorries are all named amusing names, but kind of the same reason. I think it's good. Yeah, it's just a good thing. I know that there are people probably of my generation who are going, in the past when it rained, it just rained, and we put up with the rain, and now we've got storm warnings, and there was a storm warning last week, and there were only about 3 children drowned. We're getting ridiculous here. I think it's quite good to remind us to shut the Velux windows.
We've only been doing it since 2015, but in America, they first started naming storms just after the Second World War. So, I mean, it's got quite a good establishment. Now, there is a push that we need to name heat waves, which I can actually get behind. There have been 25,000 excess deaths already, not including August figures, for across Europe, which is going some, I think. And the heat waves, they do it in Spain. Should we do it here as well?
Yes, on one condition.
Okay.
And the one condition is that we name heat waves after ludicrous right-wing politicians who deny climate change.
Okay. Well, there is also a lobby to name them after the fossil fuel companies. And I've got a new bid now because I'm rivaling your politicians who deny climate change. And I'm raising you AI companies, data centers, and all the use of water. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Yeah, you get a headline that says 21,000 people killed by heat wave Exxon. Yeah, quite right too. So I would say yes. And I like your named after, fossil fuel companies. I approve.
Okay. Well, we've sorted out the world yet again. That's what I really like. Moving swiftly on to weekends. The weekend is 100 years old. Do you know how the weekend came about, the 2-day weekend, Peter?
I do not. So enlighten me.
Yeah, it was Henry Ford. He was a bit of a radical guy. He radically put up their wages in 2019 of his workers, over doubled it to $5 a day. And he actually decreased their working day from 9 hours to 8 as well at the same time. And people thought he was crazy. But what he realized was that with the advent of the industrialization process within his factories, he absolutely shrunk the amount of time. I think it took 12 hours to make a car, and it was a real skilled specialist job. And he smashed that down to 97 minutes to make one car. And his whole purpose, it wasn't entirely altruistic, is that your best customers are your workforce. So he wanted to empower his workforce so they could buy more of his product. But actually, he also managed to retain staff because people did not want to work in that really boring environment where it was just so repetitive. And of course, we've got similar challenges coming down the line with AI, which we can talk about in a little bit. But in 1926, he let his workforce have 2 days off a week. Psychologically, there's quite a lot of benefits to a 2-day weekend, isn't there?
Absolutely. And I mean, one of the things to reflect on is that, well, so if the world were organized along the principles that I think you value, then as we get increased technological benefits, then there genuinely will be labor saving and will reduce the amount of time that we work. We haven't seen much of that. I think one of the technical reasons why we haven't is that what's happened as we've increased the technological productivity of the economy is that it's made the economy less equal. And so we're not sharing out the benefits of technological advantage. What we're doing is creating more profits for the shareholders. And that's a different mechanism. So I think that part of the move towards 2-day weekends rather than working on Saturdays is we're spending less time and less effort growing food. We're spending less time and less effort and less money manufacturing objects that we need, and therefore we have more time. And it's hugely beneficial for us. There was an article written, it was the early 1930s, I think. So it would have been just after the introduction of the weekend, by Bertrand Russell. Bertrand Russell being a great British philosopher, in praise of leisure. And what he was talking about was, well, so if you go back a little bit earlier than that, one of the things that I think is a general negative was that during early Victorian times, the sort of theological moralists decided that they would try to convince the working people that time was a gift given by God. And therefore, if you weren't using your time productively, you were somehow blasphemous, or at least doing it wrong. So the concept of wasting time came in. Now, it's true that we have only got a limited lifespan, and therefore, doing stuff with that time that we have is a good thing. What Bertrand Russell wrote about is that there are a lot better things that you can do with your time than work. And he meant that quite seriously. It wasn't like, you're working for other people and have a bit of hedonism for yourself. He was talking, and I agree with him on this. He was talking about the liberal arts. So, there's stuff that you can read. You can go to the theatre. You can make yourself physically fit. You can spend time talking with friends. You can have discussions. You can read newspapers. You can get involved in the discussions of the day. A bit like the ancient Greeks, you can go to the theatre and in a participatory manner, you can run through the big questions that you could start doing podcasts. So with your time, instead of putting a rivet in a hole and waiting for your colleague to hit it with a hammer, what you could be doing is studying the Odyssey and seeing how close to the original Christopher Nolan's vision is.
And now we know how you unwind at the weekend.
Exactly,
we are so much better for
exactly
it.
So, yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, I do. Yeah, well. Yeah.
Well, and I think
the point is that leisure and those things that we do in our leisure time are socially and morally valuable, and we should be doing more of it. I mean, I know when politicians resign, it's always to spend more time with their children, but actually spending time with people is a good thing. Having intellectual conversations, but having meaningful conversations with people about things that matter, engaging with our friends, taking time to appreciate the world around us. These are all genuinely valuable activities.
Speaking as someone who's spent an awful lot of time with her children, may I just say that time with children and leisure time, they don't actually coexist at the same time, certainly not when they're younger. So there you go. That speaks a volume as to what my experience of bringing up 3 under 3 was actually like. It was scary.
But books are good.
And actually I taught them to read. It was the best thing that I ever did, was to get them to become avid readers, although annoyingly now their vocabulary is better than mine, which is it's kind of bittersweet, really, I think you can say. The weekends are interesting. What you say about using it for good or making the most of it. They did a survey a couple of years back where they asked people to treat their weekend like they were on holiday. And when they got back, they found out after the weekend that the people who had been told to treat it like a proper holiday actually reported a lot better well-being. So maybe that should be a national campaign. On a Friday, everyone should go, we've got a weekend, we've got a holiday, we've got to enjoy it. And really, instead of letting it drift, I mean, we've all had those weekends where by the time you've washed the floors and, cleaned a loo and sort of fed people, that it doesn't feel like you've had any downtime at all. And what you're saying is if you can meaningfully do things that make you feel like you're spending it in a worthwhile way, which doesn't have to be kind of worthy, does it? Although that's also very good for your well-being to do things for other people.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a question of worthy, but I think, so you say meaningful, and I agree with you, but there's also an element of purposeful. So I think the idea of saying, what do I want to do tomorrow? What I shall do tomorrow is I'll go for a walk on Jaltonese. I'll go at 10 o'clock. What's the weather forecast like? Yeah, looks like that's a good idea. That's what I'll do. It's probably better than going, right, I'm bored. Maybe I'll go for a walk. I'm not sure if I can be bothered. So I think it's the purposeful. And I think, sitting down and reading a book because you intend to read the book rather than, I'm bored. Oh, I'll pick up that leaflet about the Jehovah's Witnesses and read it because I'm bored. So it's the purpose of making a decision that you are going to do something and then doing it, which I think is particularly useful. I think I was just reflecting on the fact that one of the things that we do in our house is that, of course, we watch television because we're not idiots. but we have our television inside a cupboard.
Oh, I always like that.
Which annoys our daughter quite a lot. What it means is that
It's a big cupboard, though, these days.
What it means is that you don't go, I'll just press the on button and see what's on telly. You have to take a little bit of a step in order to... So you decide, I want to watch something, and then you watch it. And, you go around to people's houses. Certainly when I was working more frequently as a psychologist, I go around to people's houses, and with the TV consistently on, you haven't got
but it becomes like a friend, doesn't it? When you get older, and if you've got a house and you're rambling around it all on your own, that's when you find people have multiple TVs. My dad used to have like 3 on at any one time, so there was always a voice when he went into any room. It's so sad, isn't it, really, that's what you need? But it is a big comfort blanket for people.
Yeah. I used to do that a lot with Radio 4, so I had Radio 4 more or less.
Me too.
I even listened to the Archers. Well, listen to the Archers. You don't.
It's just on its background,
it's just
isn't
there.
it? Yeah.
And that it's nicer to have Radio 4 in the background than having a silent house. I think there's something about TV, but because it's visual, you have to sit down. The minute you sit down in front of the TV, then basically your life is over. So I do think there's a moral distinction between listening to radio and watching TV.
I'm not sure TV holds the same allure that it once did now that we have social media, which we'll come on to in a minute. But we are careering towards a 4-day week, I think,
Excellent.
a 3-day weekend. When is there going to be too much downtime? Because if with AI, maybe we're all going to go to 7 days a week off. I mean, really, is that going to be any good for us to leave us without a purpose?
Yeah, but it doesn't leave us without a purpose. I mean, that absolutely doesn't leave us without a purpose for loads of reasons. I mean, it could, and I'm sure that there are people who are already very wealthy who'd quite like us to leave all of the tasks to the machinery and to do absolutely nothing apart from consume their ad revenues. But if I spent my time doing no work at all, I don't think I would have a pointless life. I think I would do lots of things. And this is back to Bertrand Russell, which is there are book I just started reading To Kill a Mockingbird. Which
I love that book.
So
what? That's just my favourite book. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I've read lots of books. It's just I haven't read that one. Okay, it's just don't go. What? It's just one of many books I haven't read.
Can't believe you didn't read it. We had to read it for GCSE as well.
Hilary, we are not going to get into competitive book listing. That's not a thing we're going to do.
We're not having a book club, Peter. I wouldn't be able to keep up with you.
My point is that if I had total freedom from any form of work whatsoever, then I'm not going to have a meaningless life. I'm going to read lots of books, and then I'm going to have
not everyone is the same as you.
Well, okay,
is it? And we are getting to a point where it is, for the first time ever, that AI is potentially going to absolutely rip the heart out of white collar workers, which it's not.
Yes.
Previous revolutions, it hasn't really hit those people so much, but we are absolutely heading towards perhaps something that is a calamity, maybe.
So, well, I think we should at another time talk about whether AI is a calamity or not, and it might be. I mean, it's perfectly possible it's a calamity. There's lots of calamities. Climate change is a calamity. Nuclear war is a calamity. Global pandemics are calamities. It's quite possible that AI is a calamity. But I think the idea of freeing people from work doesn't have to be a calamity. And I would absolutely, as a socialist, take issue with the idea that working people need to work in order to have meaning in their life. No, we can construct a society in which, when we are freed from the necessity of labour, we're doing things that are meaningful and productive and,
But meaningful and
positive
productive often involves money. I've just had the subscription renewal for the local art gallery in Chichester, and you just think, well, there you go. There's another chunk of money that's gone out of my account.
Well,
and I don't even get there that often. But I think it's a good thing to do. But my point is, it's not free to do these things. Well, we need to have like a universal minimum wage. I think Iceland, they certainly did give everyone 25 grand, I think it was.
I'm a strong supporter of the idea of basic income. And I think that it would make people more productive rather than less. And again, I mean, that's maybe something that we should talk about in the future. I mean, I think there are caveats. So I think, this is what I think about many things, which is it depends on how we collectively organize these things. So if what we do is we introduce increasing, especially AI productivity, that makes the production of the stuff that we need in society that much cheaper. And what it means is that oligarchs can make a bigger profit, but people are left with low income because they're out of a job and high priced goods, including services that they then can't afford because of the AI revolution. Then that's obviously terrible. If, on the other hand, we have an equitable system of managing this process, and all of us end up with, on average, working 1 day a week and spending the other 6 days living the sort of life that we would ideally live if we were some sort of Pericles character, good in everything and admirable in all aspects of their life. We'd spend more time with our grandkids, and we'd spend more time understanding the world, and we spend
You've
more
just
time
had
engaging
grandparents
with each other.
up and down the country running, screaming, saying, please, no, I can't do any more childcare.
I'd not say that.
I
No,
know.
because we'd have a robot doing the child care. What we'd be doing is interacting with them. I think if we use it well, I think, more. Yeah, I would celebrate leisure. One of the things that I thought when I was younger was I thought, is it going to be difficult to be retired? Am I going to get bored? And I had this sort of kind of understanding that in asking that question, I'm almost certainly answering it in the same words. The point being that I don't like being bored. So if I've got nothing to do, I will fill my day with something which is not boring. And maybe that's reading, or maybe it's building a beehive, or maybe it's going to investigate something that I've not done before, or maybe it's going and seeing friends, or maybe it's taking up a new hobby. But no, I think that we can fill that time with the stuff that makes us human extremely well. So no, I'm absolutely in favor of less work, more leisure, definitely.
I do find that I don't get bored because I can sort of pootle away and fill my time with anything. I can always think about something. That's perhaps one of my greatest achievements, or should we say procrastinations? I'm not entirely sure. But you say we can fill our time. Yes. However, so my husband was really quite successful in his career. And when he retired, first of all, he did a succession of courses to learn more things. But actually, as he's got through and ticked off the list, the extra learning he wants to be doing, there is still a gap because there isn't the same kind of goals to achieve. I think he's quite a goal-orientated person. What are we going to do when we have to set all our own goals? That's what's going to be difficult, I think, for people.
Well, clearly, we need to set up a company offering people quite expensive courses in personal goal setting.
Amen. Good. All right. Well,
we'll
do that.
Look,
We've got our future sorted. That's perfect.
and I mean, obviously, I'm joking, but there is an element whereby we have to adjust to the world that we find ourselves in, and that means learning how to accommodate ourselves to the realities of life. And I think the idea of it's civics again, isn't it? It's this idea of so there are things we do at school to prepare kids for the world in which they're living. And I think that the idea that...
Oh, no, hold on. That's all stopped.
Yeah, exactly.
We're not teaching them all that stuff. And really, it's a shocking shame. Look, we stopped doing cookery lessons and people started getting fat. I mean, really.
Yeah. So when I started to have discussions at work about retirement, it was basically, all right, Pete, sling your hook. There wasn't an element of, maybe you'd like to join the local newly retired folks club so that you can learn how to do retirement properly. I mean, it is true that I go down to the pub with my friends and we talk about how to do it, and we're quite good at it, I think. So I think it will happen.
There's always
naturally.
the University of the Third Age. That's the club, isn't there? Or Saga.
Yeah,
Saga holidays.
It's possible. And I would happily avail myself of it. At the moment, I have too much to do, and I
and long may it be that way. Moving forward then, we've touched on AI and what it means, and we've also talked a little bit about addiction with your concept of the week. Our final headline this week is talking about the Meta trial in America. 29 states are suing Meta. It's quite an interesting one. Meta also took a hammering in New Mexico not very long ago, at the beginning of this month, where I think it's something like £700,000. 700 million pounds they have been sued for, which is quite an extraordinary amount of time. And it's all centered around the addictive nature of their platform. And what they are suing Meta for this time is $1.4 trillion. That's the worst case scenario, mind you. But in paper money, that would take you around the world 3 times. Thank you very much, BBC's newscast, for that nice little tip and hint there. They're only worth 1.5 trillion, so it would absolutely spark the end of Meta, which may not be a bad thing. At the end of the day, Meta, obviously, they are saying that the case is without merit, that they do take appropriate action to ensure young people are not kept on this roller coaster that is social media, and that they have not put profit before people. So that's their opinion. But we are getting quite an intensive battle going on at the moment. Mm-hmm. And psychologists are at the heart of this, aren't they? The psychologists are giving evidence and saying that young people are being harmed. Can you give me a rundown, really, about how something like social media ends up being addictive? Because to my mind, you always think of addiction as biological. And I think that's wrong, isn't it? It stems from the psychology. And social media, does it trigger the same sort of biological processes as we get from drugs and alcohol?
So I mean, opinions differ on this, and in terms of understanding human nature, when you move towards the people who have a sort of more reductionist biological approach, then they'll talk about dopamine hits, and they'll talk about, some people will give expert evidence arguing that physiological responses to physiological substances have a different impact than psychological addiction and so forth.
Hang on, it sounds like we're getting into that whole tobacco debate now.
Exactly. The colleagues that I used to work with, I've not done primary research on addiction myself, but have worked with, and I've been head of department for people who've done work on addictions. And at least at Liverpool, the argument was going that if it's something that's rewarding, then it's going to be addictive. You'll do it again. So if you put, like I was saying earlier, if you put our fox on a variable ratio reinforcement schedule expecting food, then she'll come back in a way which it's very difficult now for her to shake the habit of good, because I like seeing the fox of an evening. So that's the purpose of
your neighbours don't have chickens, do you?
Not anymore.
My husband started feeding a fox, and then about a week later, the neighbours' chickens got eaten.
Yeah, it's in the nature of foxes that they eat chickens, and I realise it's not in the nature of foxes that they get fed by cat food every third day. But I appreciate that. I've had a scout round for chickens and haven't seen any. So, and anyway,
well, no, because the foxes eat them.
Because the foxes anyway. So
the fox is full, is your opinion, isn't it? It doesn't need to eat the chickens.
The cat food is not a drug that's causing addiction in the fox. It's the interplay between the goal of eating food and the fact that when you've eaten food, you've achieved a goal, and the repeat behavior. And so, anything that is a desired goal state for us will be addictive. So yes, drugs and chemicals and food and pornography and the applause of one's friends and getting, kids, especially boys, get really addicted by causing laughter in the classroom. It's hugely addictive for them. And I remember going to a carol concert once where there's this kid standing up on stage doing the most ridiculous kind of outrageous dance and causing people to giggle, and utterly ridiculous. Totally addicted to his own foolishness. So I think the idea that, if it is something that causes us to repeat our patterns.
It's probably one of my kids, you know that, don't you?
Quite possibly. Very good looking. Anyway, so I think the idea of it being addictive. So if I was giving, well, first of all, I don't think I would give expert evidence in a case like that, because my research background is not in the field of either social media or addiction. But I would be very surprised, and it would strike me as a slightly unjust outcome if the outcome of this court case isn't that absolutely these things are, for want of a more useful word, addictive, and it's doing harm to kids. And we see it repeatedly. We see evidence being brought forward by authoritative figures about how time on screen is doing harm to kids, about how physically time on screen is doing harm to kids' sleeping and kids' attention, how their use of the mobile phones is affecting their attention, their memory span, and so forth. There's bullying. There's the disruption of social relationships. There's just simply the time spent on screen. Then there's the risks posed by exposing yourself to the sort of contact that you have with people through the messaging on the apps. And yeah, I know I've got a phone. I look at these things, and I'm a cheapskate, so I don't tend to pay for stuff. So I get ads come through, and they have stopped recently. But I used to get a lot of ads that said, "Try this new game. It's the most addictive thing you've ever seen in your life." And they were very blatant about the fact that these things are, and people were saying, I can't stop. There's the doom scrolling. I think all of the evidence strikes me that the two things are going on, which is that the systems that we use on our phones are hugely addictive. And secondly, that is doing us collectively harm. And then I suppose the third element, particularly so for children. I mean, it might be the case.
Why is it particularly so for children? Why are they so much more susceptible?
Well, I think, first of all, I think a lot of the apps that we're talking about are particularly habit forming if you have the time and the lack of other requirements in order to be habit forming. So it's possible to sit in the back of a car, scrolling through TikTok, laughing on a variable ratio reinforcement pattern of funny videos, and do nothing else for the entire car journey. But you obviously can't if you're driving. And you can't if you're working. And you
Some
can't
people
if you're
try, unfortunately.
Some people try. I think it's just a fact. Kids find it more difficult to shift their perspective from themselves to other people. It's more difficult for them to, move from I can have it and I want it, therefore I'll do it, to I need to balance that with other perspectives. I think they're less likely to be able to defer gratification, pause, think about the long-term consequences, think about whether they want to forego this pleasure right now in favor of a greater pleasure later. And kids are just worse at all of those quite important tasks. They also don't know stuff. So, adults know things about how older adults will pretend to be 13, 14 in order to befriend people on social media for various nefarious purposes. And kids simply don't know that because they don't read the same reports and websites and news stories and so forth.
The main whistleblower from Meta basically got fired up to come and be the chief prosecutorial witness because of the experience of his own daughter, where she was sent nude pics and where she found that it was virtually, completely ineffectual to try and flag this to Meta, and the bullying that she undertook as well that she happened to her while she was on these platforms. So he's really got to be in his bonnet. It is quite a difficult thing because with the trial, as well as the fine that Meta is possibly going to end up having to pay if it's found guilty, it's going to have to change its processes. So all those things that make social media, the likes and the autoplay function, are going to get taken away. And it'll be interesting to see whether young people still are hooked.
Well, so I've got a car and it's got a sat nav, and you're in the car and you're driving and sat nav comes up and you go, "Oh, I think I'll just call in at Lidl." And you press the search button and the screen goes blank and it says, "Don't use the search button when you're driving." And I think to myself, yeah, absolutely, because I could find a Lidl on the way home or die. I think I'll choose let's wait. So I think that as adults, there are loads of things that we do where it also speaks to kind of populist American politics as well. If we require through a court case that Meta or TikTok or whoever change their algorithms so that we can no longer do the thing that we're doing that we really enjoyed doing a minute ago, then yes, that will be a restriction on their freedom to make a product that does whatever it is that they want to do and make money out of us. And it will restrict our freedom to look at videos of fat people falling over. However, the benefits will be enormous. And that's what we do in civilized societies. What we don't do is to say, it would benefit me to have a look at your iPhone, my iPhone, decide that your iPhone is smarter and newer than my iPhone, so I'll just nick it. No, we have rules that say that's not what we do. We could do that, but we will choose not to do that thing because it's in everybody's best interest for us to have a few kind of civilized rules about it. And we haven't developed those rules about AI and about social media. And it is possible to give 5-year-olds the possibility to accept WhatsApp messages from anybody on the planet. But it is a really bad idea to do that. Let's have some rules to regulate our own behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that was the outcome, I think, from the New Mexico trial, is that they were not allowing adults anymore to message children. It's like, well, you would like to think that that was something that everyone was in agreement with and you didn't need a court to mandate it. But it has been a really Wild West time, I personally think, since the start of the internet, because I understood this democratization of information was to try and make it available to everyone. And, you know, largely I am in favor of non-censorship. I'm in favor of free speech, but we've got children.
Yeah.
And there are rules that protect children from drinking, from gambling, you know, and internet use really should be no different to that. We've got our own court case coming up, or our own laws coming through next year, aren't they? Which will hopefully really change social media and how that interacts for people. And perhaps Meta could have made some bigger changes before this court case came along, but they are determined, aren't they, to keep fighting these cases.
Yeah, well, they will, because they're making money out of it, or I don't know what the profit and loss situation is, but they're trying to make money out of it. I mean, it's a commercial business. They're people like Meta, in my opinion, are not making products in order to make the world a better place. They're making products in order to make money. They want to have a profitable business. And, you know, in some ways, you could argue that it's absolutely fine. You know, what we generally do in society is we let people do things, and people can do whatever they want unless it harms other people. And we're finding out that the unfettered use of social media and the internet and so forth and mobile phones, it turns out is causing people harm. Therefore, you bring in some restrictions on it. You know, it's the same as the gin craze in the 18th century. And they go, well, it's just
and
a
last
food
week
stuff.
Down my lane.
Yeah, it's just a food stuff. You know, if you want to make gin in your bath, that's absolutely fine, unless it turns out that it's harming people. Now we realize it's harming people. We need to regulate the alcohol industry. Absolutely fine, in my opinion. That's kind of what civilized. You can drive your car whatever speed you like, wherever you want on the road. Oh no, that's going to harm people. Maybe we need speed limits and rules about, like, maybe a highway code. Good idea. And
oh, Peter, you're just so involved with the nanny state.
Exactly. Well,
yeah,
so
I'm all for it myself if people are going to live, frankly. But
I like treating children with a bit of care.
Yeah, me too. You know, they are our future, after all. Oh, it sounds like a song. Before we wrap up for the week, Peter, as ever, you will have a tip for us to try, a little nugget of well-being that will help us in our daily lives cope more easily. What is your tip this week?
So I've written down on my little bit of paper, set limits. And I think
I'm bad at this.
Exactly. And so that's all it is. And I've done a couple of things recently. The one is I've permitted my phone to show me screen time, which is, my screen time isn't great. I mean, my brain is just as kind of sensitive to the external pressures on it as anybody else's. And so I'm not going, well, I understand how addictive processes work and I understand the negative consequences of social media, therefore I'm immune. No, I understand these things and therefore I have to set limits. So you have to set limits on your time doing things, and I set reminders. So I think the idea of saying we are exposed to all of these pressures, therefore we'll set limits. So, you know, I will set a limit of 30 minutes for social media use, or I won't use my phone after a certain period of time, or and other limits.
Yeah, but I can't do this thing where you put your phone away before bed, because I'm like, well, it's my alarm. And if I wake up, I want to put on the next story for me to listen to so I can go back to sleep.
Hey,
Is that sad?
Yes, no. So I'm in exactly the same position. So my point isn't, you're in the wrong, I'm in the right, I'm brilliant, you're not. And my point isn't, you have to set limits, but I don't have to. My point is, we should all set limits, and me too. So the point here is that, I mean, my tip for the week isn't, I don't need to, but you plebs need to follow my advice. No, my tip for the week is, I also need to set limits. I need to put my phone away. I need to, restrict my screen time on things. I need to have a choice I need to make active choices about when I use things. No phones at the dinner table kind of thing. Those are the limits that we need to apply to ourselves. And I'm as bad as anybody else. What I find, incidentally, is that my use of these things does a sort of scallop up, and then I have to remind myself again, and then it scallops up. And I find myself, we're sitting down, we're eating dinner, we have a conversation about something, and we go, I shall just check that. And
yes,
so the
that's when it does come out. Yes, no, I do.
And then you put
get
limits
that.
back in.
But limits are not just for social media. I feel sometimes I need to have more limits in my life generally. I need to be able to say no and set limits with other people. It doesn't just stop at the tech.
It doesn't stop at tech. You say no to other people. Incidentally, completely related to the point earlier. In a post-retirement flurry of things, I got myself a lathe, and I enjoy working with my hands with wood. And then people go, "Ooh, you should sell that." And I'm going, "No, I don't want to turn it into a business. I just want to do it as a leisure." So I
expect to see a little exhibition next week of the latest things that you've turned with your lathe.
I'm looking in the background to see if there's anything there. I'll find you something to show you.
It's probably a giant bee that you've made.
But bees aren't circular, so you can't turn the bee.
Can you, by the way, stop bigging up the bees, because husband is actually very seriously considering getting bees now.
Well, we have a lot of hives at the moment because our bees swarmed. So I can give you a colony. So just let him know that you can have a ready-made colony with a mated queen, cheap price, easily available. What was I saying? So my point is, I don't want to do these things for money. So I'm setting limits even when it comes to working. I think it's alcohol. Set limits. Just it's keep things in proportion, because I think I've probably, if such things exist, I think I'm probably more prone to getting addicted to things than the average person.
Oh no, I think that for myself as well. My dad went up to 80 cigarettes a day when he was alive.
Yeah.
The house stunk, you can imagine. And then went cold turkey and gave up and was totally fine. Whereas my mother, who, I think capped at about 11 cigarettes in a day, she took a couple more years to give up on those little sneaky ones that she would partake of every now and then. But because of that, it's always made me really cautious, not to get involved in gambling or hard drugs. Absolutely. Because I worry that I will be the next person that's on the street lying there with a duvet over me. Luckily, maybe. Yeah,
my weak spot is that because I think I'm clever, I think I can work out the maths of gambling, and so I never gamble because I would get drawn into it. But no, the point is, I'm not saying set limits because you plebs need to set limits, but I'm wonderful. I set limits for myself, and I think
and we all need to,
and we all need to. Partly because life is as life is, partly because we live in an abundant society and we can always order a jar of Dolce de Leche from Amazon, and that's like death. And because people who own large companies would really quite like us not to set limits on our behaviour, because then they'd make more profit out of us.
And we don't want them to win, do we?
We don't want them to win.
No. All right, well, thank you very much for this week. Join us next week when we will be having more forays into the feelings of people and why we behave the way that we do. Nice to see you, Peter. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The Experience podcast is hosted by Hilary Jeffs and Peter Kinderman, produced by James Jones at Granary Digital. You can find us on social media, and you can get in touch via email at hello@experiencepodco.com with any questions, comments or topics you'd like us to cover. And don't forget to leave us a review.